This is Sound Experience, the show that explores the vast world of audio production through the experiences of our guest and the ears of your host, mixing engineer and producer Tim Dolbeare.
Hey, welcome to Sound Experience, powered by Intertalk Radio, your voice of the music business. I am your host, Tim Dolbeare, coming to you live from Eclectica Studios here in Austin, Texas. Give a big shout out real fast to our sponsors, Front End Audio, your ultimate pro audio dealer, and mine, and Source Connect by Source Element. They're the people who actually provide the HD audio sync accurate software solution that we use for me to connect into the station in San Diego from the studio here in Austin, Texas. And it's also a fantastic program if you do any type of ADR work or remote recording where you need to be able to take control of a DAW from another location, as well as have a client be able to talk and jump in with your session in real time and have it all work in real time. It's replaced everything that ISDN used to do for us in the studio. So that's Source Connect by Source Element. All right. Well, thank you for all of the cool cards and emails and letters and all of the negative feedback also. We appreciate hearing from you and hearing all of it. And you can always get in touch with us either through the website that you're listening to us on, the Intertalk Radio /Sound Experience Radio site, or you can get in touch with me directly at timdolbeare.com. And a reminder also, if you want to discuss with me having your project mixed or mastered by me, I work with Grammy winners and labels and indie artists at all budget ranges, and everyone gets my complete and full attention and experience. So click on through to timdolbeare.com, and you can check out the one-song risk-free trial that allows you to hear exactly what I will do and my mixing style, really, and how it will sound with your art, with your vision on your project, and how we can bring that to life. So anyway, timdolbeare.com, you can check out that. Today on the program, we have on a Grammy winner as well as a Pensado Award-winning mastering engineer. He's worked with Alison Krauss and Union Station and Maroon 5, and just the list goes on and on and on. An incredible body of work and a great, great talent. So please, welcome to the show, Mr. Brad Blackwood.
Doing great, Tim. How are you doing?
So tell us how you got into mastering, how you ended up in the world of mastering, where you came from. For the people who aren't familiar with you, I'm sure they're familiar with your work, but where you came from, how you came up through the ranks, and how you ended up in the world of mastering as opposed to a mix engineer or audio engineer and stuff. Can you kind of give us a back history and a background of you?
Sure, no problem at all. I'm like the typical high school kid in the late 80s that didn't play an instrument really, and had friends who were in a band, and so I was the geek that would hang out with the guys in their garage and record them on the little cassette 4-tracks and things like that. I was really always interested in that, but never really, I think, considered having a career in it. Went off to school and studied a few different subjects, but none of them really got me excited. I heard about this place called Full Sail down in Florida, and I ended up attending down there. Really enjoyed it, enjoyed the study. I thought I got a good amount of foundational knowledge that I could build from. Then right after we graduated, I moved up to Memphis, Tennessee, and got on at the Ardent Studios here in Memphis, which is a pretty famous studio celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. In fact, tons of incredible music that's come through there from ZZ Top and just all kinds of great blues and rock bands, especially.
Cool.
Worked there for 7 years and reopened their, at that point, closed mastering department. And then in 2003, set off on my own and started up my own business, Euphonic Masters, and I've been here ever since.
Great. So tell us more about Euphonic Masters, the actual setup, the company, and what you guys do and on your day-to-day.
Well, it's a studio. We originally built it at our house back in 2003. We had a fairly limited budget, actually, and just kind of, did the best I could. Got decent ears. I don't really know a ton about acoustics, but I read a lot about acoustics and studied and built a small room that seemed to work well. Got some good sounding records there. But then in 2007, we built this new facility. And then in 2009, I hired Northford Acoustics to do the acoustic upgrade to the room to really dial it in. And from that point on, that's what we've been doing. It's just this fantastic sounding room. It's amazing what it sounds like. Got a great speaker system. We use B&W Nautilus 802 mains. They're powered by some pretty esoteric path labs, or what, Class A monoblock amplifiers. They're ginormous. Got dual Velodyne subs, so we hear everything from 15 hertz up to, whatever. And yeah, it just sounds great in here. It's really easy to listen to. I can hear tons of detail. And to me, in mastering, that's just really probably across all parts of production, but especially in mastering, that's the part that you have to have right. No amount of gear, no amount of anything else is going to make up for poor acoustics or bad reproduction. So we got that dialed in, and the gear just kind of fell into place from there.
So what part in your career did you really feel a calling to move over to mastering? Was it something that you had wanted to do? Was it something where you just were being viewed and looked at by other people and were the guide to go to who kind of understood the whole mastering thing? Or was it something that you had to kind of force yourself into?
It was something that, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated. I thought I wanted to be like a mix engineer or something like that. I mean, I think when you're in school, that's the glamorous gig, and that's what I wanted to do. And when I got to Ardent and started working, and they bought at the time, a Sadie, which was an early 2-track digital editor. Right. I guess it was 4-track at the time, but and I basically just took the box over. I learned it inside and out, and I would run the thing anytime anyone needed editing done or whatever. And in the mid-'90s, that was still new enough to be able to do nonlinear editing that that kind of became most of my work there was just doing editing for people and cutting stuff out, whatever. That slowly morphed into mastering. But what sort of helped put the accelerant on it was I was at that time I was still doing some mixing and some recording and things like that here and there, and I just realized that my mindset, the way that I work, the way that I'm built, wired, isn't really geared to doing, tracking, especially tracking or mixing. When I hear guys talk about, hey, I spent 6 hours mixing the song, I kind of go bonkers thinking about listening to the same song for 6 hours, much less, tracking.
Yeah.
We were working with some excellent musicians at the time, but sometimes you'd have a guy that would work for an hour trying to nail, just a rhythm guitar part or something. And it's like, that was when I decided this is not for me. I'm going to go insane. I'll go postal if I have to do this. So that just kind of reinforced the fact that I was already doing a lot of 2-channel stuff, 2-channel work. And one day, one of the owners of Ardent came in and said, "Hey, we've got this album that needs to be mastered for our label. You've been doing a great job. You got good ears. Why don't you give it a shot?" And that just kind of opened the door for it. I'd kind of been thinking about it, I guess, but that was what really got me down that road.
And mastering obviously was different at that point too than it has developed into in 2016. What were some of the challenges of jumping in both feet? We had tons of gear there. It wasn't necessarily quote unquote mastering gear, but I could grab a DCL 200. Right. Which is a nice, transparent, relatively transparent compressor. There was tons of outboard gear I could grab and assemble a chain together when I needed to for mastering. Didn't have a great room or environment to work in, but it is what it is when you're starting off. Right.
But really, the biggest challenge was like it or not, in the late '90s. The volume war was already happening. I mean, people were already wanting to cut really loud records, and it was learning how to do that because my mental approach and my approach was, and really to this day still is, to try to do as little, harm to the audio. I don't want to add distortion. I don't want to do these things to it. And so that was a steep learning curve, was how are these guys getting these records this loud? I can't get it close to that, with what was at the time were the common compressors and limiters. And of course, later I found out most of them were just digitally, or rather clipping the input of the AV converter, which,
right.
That was an eye opener. But I was young. I was just out of school, and it was 96 or so. And so that was when I figured that out. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. So all the things that I've been taught are out the window. And now we're making real music. We got to do it, whatever we have to do.
Exactly. So a really interesting thing that I see you post on Facebook all the time is you post a thing called morning listening, where you'll put something up where you have, I'm listening today to this album, and it's almost always an LP, which is kind of cool. And you say something a little about it or whatever, but basically it's every morning you're starting, or most mornings you're starting with listening to an album. How did that come about, and how does that help you as a mastering engineer?
Well, I think it just came about sort of organically. It's something that I've always done. I'm not a sort of a frenetic listener. I don't bounce around very much. I think it's just because I was the tail end of that probably generation where you'd buy a record and you sit down and listen to the whole thing, or even in your car, you listen to one side of the tape, flip it over and listen to the other.
Yes.
So that's just kind of how I listen to music. I get in the mood for a certain artist or a certain album, and I just want to hear the album. I don't want to hear that song and then jump to some other artist and So that's just how I listen anyway. What I realized one day was I came into work years and years ago, and it was early, and I had to get started early because we had a ton of work to do that day, and I had some plans that afternoon I had to get out for. And so I was, started cutting at 8:30, 9 in the morning. And that afternoon, after I had a chance for my ears to wake up, if you will, a little bit, and just kind of acclimate themselves to the sound, I went back and listened to what I was cutting, and it just didn't sound like anything I had cut. It sounded really different. I wasn't hearing things the same way. And that's when it occurred to me that, at least for me, I need to get up in the mornings and kind of let my ears wake up with something that I'm kind of familiar with. I know what it's supposed to sound like, and also that I find just interesting for whatever reason it's tickling my fancy that day, whether it's for sonic reasons or just the groove or whatever. Every morning I get up and I'll listen to an album. Usually I'll come in, get here about an hour or so before I actually need to start the first session. And I'll listen down and, I'll be answering emails or post answering questions that people have asked me in various locations. And that's just that time for my ears to sort of wake up. I'm not intently listening, with my eyes closed sort of thing, but it's just a way to kind of listen to something and I catch things all the time that on records I've listened to, maybe 100 times that I hadn't really heard before, little details or little things. And it's just, just a good way, I think, for me to wake up in the morning and kind of get my ears calibrated, if you will, so I can start my day.
Exactly.
And, I started posting it a while back kind of randomly, and then people started messaging me and asking me, hey, can you do more of these? Can you do more of these? And so, I like sharing kind of what I'm listening to. So there you go.
Well, yeah, and it's a great business thing too. If you listen to our show from last week, we were talking all about branding and getting your studio business out there and staying in front of people without saying, "Hey, buy my product." It's just a constant involvement of the people who follow you. It's a wonderful way of doing that. Well, I took the advice of it because I saw you doing that. And I had already been doing stuff where sometimes when I come into the studio to get, as you say, calibrated is a good way to describe it, is I would listen to something and that helps set myself to the room, set myself to the speakers. And so that's something I try to do quite often is calibrate and get – it's not really a super intense thing, but it's just kind of a getting refamiliar with it after being out in the world and hearing music on 50 different systems and televisions and such. Sure. So I found it to be a great practice that has been really rewarding. And you might have done it just for music and for enjoyment as well as a little bit of calibration stuff. And I find it to be it's really important. It really is. That's why I brought it up so early in the show, is because I felt how important it is. So
well, that's cool.
Let's get a little bit into your yeah, cool. Let's get a little bit into your approach and stuff as far as mastering. Obviously, you don't have to give away any of the secrets, but as far as approaches and things that you look for when you're mastering, one of the great sayings that I use for mixing and for mastering really stemmed off of a past guest who had said this. Michael Romanowski actually said it, which was it's about opinions. And so when someone hires me to mix their album, it's not just everyone has great gear. Well, a lot of people have great gear. A lot of people have great chops, but it's really their opinion that is the most important thing, because it's how they're going to interpret and present your art. And so as far as your approach and how you work with projects that come in, without thinking at this point about mistakes and things that you have to correct, what are some of the approaches that when you get something and you open up and you listen to, tell us about your workflow and how you approach them.
Well, I'll say this first off, no secrets. There just aren't any secrets. What you see is what you get.
Right.
As an aside, most people probably don't know this. It's been a few years since I shut it down, but for about 10 years, I ran a mastering forum online called Mastering Demystified. And I called it that because I was really tired of the smoke and mirrors aspect that a lot of guys had about trying to make mastering into this black art. They wanted to perpetuate that idea when it's just not. It's just a different style of listening. And as Michael said, it's my opinion. It's it's an objective thing of what I think it should sound like. So basically, when I first load it up, after I get everything kind of in order, I like to throw the songs in a rough sequence. I don't do any topping or tailing or anything like that. I just literally throw them in the decision list in order, and I just start listening down to the record and just kind of hear the overall attitude or the overall tone or those sorts of things. Because every band, you could have it recorded in 10 different studios by 10 different engineers, and it's incredible to me how the band always seems to shine through the recording, and it still sounds like that band, no matter what you do to it, good or bad. Yes. And so I really want to get a feel for that band, what this record sounds like to them, and kind of usually the mixer will kind of tell you, if you will, what it's supposed to sound like. You'll hear what the engineer's going for, and then right. I try to really be a minimalist. I try to do as little as I can to make it excellent. And one of the biggest compliments I get from guys over and over again is, hey, this sounds just like my mix, only better. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Obviously, if there are issues that need to be addressed that radically change the mix, we'll do that. But I mean, that's pretty rare. I mean, most people get it pretty close, and then you just dial it in from there, a little nip and tuck here and there. Denny Purcell, he died about 15 years ago now. He was an incredible mastering engineer in Nashville. Just probably not very well known right now, but I mean, for many times we're on the Hot 100 chart. He would have like 8 or 9 of the top 100 singles on the radio. He was just huge in Nashville. He had this great saying: "It's you only get to hear it for the first time once." And so I'm always really careful about listening to it, because the more we listen to something, the less objectivity we can bring to it. Those little warts and things that immediately stand out to us, they kind of become part of the background of the song that we are used to hearing, and we don't react to them quite as quickly as we would otherwise. So I really like to just bounce around very quickly and just get a feel for the record, verse, chorus, that kind of a thing, and then go in and start really soaking into the tune and getting a feel for that, because that's my first real deep listen. And I want to minimize that. I want to work as quickly as I can without rushing, but work as quickly as I can.
Hang on, we're coming up on a break. Up on a break. We'll pick it right up from there again after this break. Back in 2 minutes. Listen to Sound Experience.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it, because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hey, it's Tracy Smith
and Beth Venus
of Girls Talk Rock, right here on the Intertalk Radio Network.
Every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific.
Okay, Beth, they know that, but we want you to know that the industry pro's choice is Silver Tiger Production.
SDP is a full-service production agency offering sound, lighting, installations, talent buying, staffing, backline equipment rental, and sales. Kapow!
It's everything in the entertainment performance industry. It's all that. SilverTigerProduction.com.
This is Sound Experience, the show that explores the vast world of audio production through the experiences of our guest and the ears of your host, mixing engineer and producer Tim Dolbeare.
Hey, welcome back to the second segment of Sound Experience powered by Intertalk Radio. I am your host, Tim Dolbeare, coming to you live from Eclectica Studios in Austin, Texas. And we are talking with Brad Blackwell from Euphonic Mastering. And we were talking about how you approach stuff when you first get a project and you throw it up on the speakers in front of you. So let's continue from there.
Yeah, so, we listen through, like I said, probably verse, chorus, all the way through, just kind of get a feel for what the record's, where it needs to go or where they're trying to take it, and then dive in and really dig in deep to those songs. And as I said, you only get to hear it the first time once. I want to work quickly and efficiently. I'm a huge efficiency geek. And not rushing, obviously, but the more times I'm listening to something, the more it sounds like it's supposed to sound that way, whether it really sounds like it should or not. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I just get used to the way something sounds. And so sometimes you have to take an ear break and just turn everything off for 30 seconds or a minute and fire it back up, and automatically you kind of recalibrate it again. You hear what's going on. But, and I like to work in order. I like to work in sequence as much as possible. That's not always possible because a lot of times bands will change the sequence even radically from what you're working from initially. But I like to do that because sometimes you can work from one song to the other, and the previous song will actually kind of influence what you're doing with the next song because they sit side by side and they may be quite different in their arrangement or something like that. So I like to work in sequence when I can, and then that's about it. Just a little EQ here and there, a little compression is needed, and you're done.
I totally get the thing about working quickly, because the more you listen to it, the more your ears will tune into that. I've had situations where I played somebody a mix that I did, and I go back and I play a rough mix that they had sent me on it, in comparison. And the rough mix might be completely frequency wrong, just all the top end gone, tons of mud around 250 hertz. And if you listen to that rough mix for too long, when you switch back to yours, which is EQ'd correctly, it'll sound scooped out because your ears have now adjusted the other way to the other thing. Definitely. And when
you can hear that,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You can hear that when you listen to just about anything. You listen to there's some great records out there that I love the music. But in my opinion, the EQ is just not where it should be. It's too bright, or it's too this or too that. And it's always amazed me, even to this day, that I'll put that record on, and the first song, it's like, wow, that those high frequencies are setting the curtains on fire. And yet by the second or third song, it just sounds right to me. My ears have adjusted. Everything's just equalized out. My mind's hearing it the way it wants to hear it, not necessarily how it sounds. And everything's fine. Then I go back and listen to it 10 minutes later, and once again, it's like, oh my goodness, that's so bright, that's so this, it's so that. Your mind equalizes that very quickly. It gets used to it very rapidly. And so I think speed, efficiency when working on this stuff is key when you're mastering. If you really want to try to have an objective, view of that. Some guys are very hands-on, and their whole thing in mastering is they want to be part of the sort of creative process, and what I mean to the point is they feel like their role is to be very hands-on and change the audio the way they want to hear it, all this kind of stuff. I tend to view mastering as a little more hands-off, unless it needs to be. It's typically more of a polish instead of a, reforming the project. So that's always been my approach. I think it's more of an old school approach, probably. It's, what mastering was 40 years ago more than it is maybe today in some ways, but people seem to like it.
As a product specialist for Sequoia for 6.5 years, I would travel around North America going to various different mastering engineers and studios and such, which was just incredible and such a delight and such an awesome time. But I did meet some mastering engineers who had the attitude of, I own these 12 pieces of gear, and gosh darn it, I'm going to use them all. Audio's everything's going through everything, because if I own it, it's being used, and we call that kind of like the video game version of music production, where it's like you're just doing it, for fun, as opposed to what's actually for the artist and for their artistic vision. So I totally understand the pitfalls of that. I see it happen often. But having your hands off of it, let's dive in deeper then. So when you get a project in, at what point and how often do you have to kick it back to the mix engineer for fixes?
That almost never happens. That's that seems to be, when I look on the forums and stuff, that seems to be something that a lot of people talk about doing now. I don't really get it. Now, I get it. I mean, different people working at different levels with different types of engineers. I work with everything from guys who have never mixed a record before to guys who have mixed half the things you've ever listened to and everything in between. So, but a vast majority of the stuff that I get is pretty stinking close. It's not bad. The only time I have to send stuff back, and usually it's not me sending it back, it's me getting it as far along as I can, and the artist goes, yeah, this isn't enough. We can't get the vocal out enough. We have to get them to print another version or something like that. It's pretty rare that I've said, hey, there's a problem with this and we need to fix it. And I mean, the last time I did that I can recall was probably like 3 years ago, when a guy sent a mix, and it was just, the mix was so loud it was distorting before I ever touched it. And I just said, hey, we got to get one that's like 3 dB quieter. And even that looked like a block of cheese, but at least it wasn't distorting. But that's pretty rare. I mean, and that was one of these ginormous, super famous mixers. I mean, that's just, you never know what you're going to get. Some of them send you that, and some of these great, really famous mixers send you stuff that looks like a Dire Straits record from 1985. So,
right.
It's, you never know what you're going to get, but yeah, it's a pretty rare thing for me. I think most of the time, if the client likes the mix, then I should be able to work with it. I should be able to make them happy. That's kind of how I view it.
Yeah, I often think about the fact that, okay, they didn't just run this mix and send it to, they instantly printed it to Dropbox and never listened to it. There had to have been many, many people listen to this and go over it. There were revisions most likely done to the mix multiple times, and it's sounding how they like it. And so a lot of times get out of the way during mastering. That's interesting. Exactly. Do you still get a lot of mixes coming in with multiple versions, a plus 0.5 lead vocal, plus 1 dB vocal, stuff like that? Or are you getting stuff more settled out nowadays?
I think it really depends on who the mix engineer is. I've got some mix engineers I work with regularly, and they will send, no exaggeration, like 6 or 7 versions of each song. It'll be a vocal up half, vocal up 1, snare up half, vocal down half. And they'll do that with everything they print, and they'll include all of them in the Dropbox or the WeTransfer. And so I'll get this, 3 gigabyte thing, and everything was done at 48K, but there's just so many versions that it takes up a ton of space. Right. But then we have other ones where, like we had a record I'm finishing up right now for a well-known band, and they were told at the beginning that they didn't have vocal ups, that the guy never even printed any vocal ups. Turns out that he did, and so here at the last minute, we're going to be recalling and printing a couple of vocal up versions and recutting all the masters and stuff. But they weren't included to the band or the management. They were just sort of like, they did it in the background after everything was done. So it really just depends. I mean, I would say most of the time I don't get versions now, unless they want to have those runs. They'll send me instrumentals because they want to have those done for publishing or whatever. But most of the time they're just sitting, here's the mixes, run with it.
Cool. Are you outputting a lot of different versions now for the different mediums, such as, are you getting requests for LP and such?
Do a lot of vinyl preparation, a lot of vinyl cutting masters. I'd say probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of all the projects get vinyl cutting masters now. Do a lot of masters for iTunes. Probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the projects are getting MFIT now. I'd say 95% are still getting DDPs because they want to do CDs. Those are really the 3 primary masters that we deliver. We do have some other stuff. People do some high-res. They want high-res. They want 2496 back or whatever. We can do that. But generally speaking, I'd say most of the time a project's going to want a DDP and MFIT or maybe vinyl as well. Get a lot of that.
Cool. You obviously have you have an analog chain and a lot of analog gear and such like that. Are you doing a pitch capture type thing, or what's your preference for workflow? Yeah, that's how I've worked for years. I use Sequoia as my capture, my editing, my delivery thing. Either if it comes on analog tape, obviously we use our tape machine. Otherwise, we use WaveLab as the pitching, if you will, software, playback software, and plays through the chain. And then we, of course, capture it in Sequoia. But nowadays I'm an analog studio. I love the sound of analog gear, and I use it tons and tons and tons. But
I also do quite a bit of stuff that comes in, and it sounds great when you just cut it digitally as well. So it's sort of a hybrid approach. It's whatever feels best for that particular record, whatever sounds best. Sometimes I'll play with it and try 2 different versions and see which one seems to get me closer to where I want it to be at the end. Sometimes the analog wins, sometimes the digital wins. So it really is. I mean, for many years I was just this diehard analog guy, and I finally come to the realization that it's not. There's no one single answer. Sometimes it's better analog, sometimes it's better digital, and so it's just a matter of what sort of processing seems to help the project the best.
I've had Joe Palmisio on a couple times. We're good friends. He's the next town over from you, and out in Nashville. And we talked about that exact type of thing where it's 2 different tool sets, and music and songs react differently to the 2 different tool sets. And so a lot of stuff he does, if he wants to stay completely out of the way, he's doing it in the box. But when he needs to dig in deeper, give more of a sonic signature, change an emotional feel to it, then he's most often going into the analog realm of it. Do you make the decision as far as this is how I'm going to do it, or do you provide back to your client a digital and analog version and let them, if it's something where it's not a clear case? Where it's like, no, I'm not sure which way.
No, that's a decision that I make on my end. Obviously, if the client doesn't like it, we have to do a revision, and they ask for something, and I feel like I have to switch gears, because of that. That's not a problem. But I feel like to a certain extent, it's going to add confusion to the entire process when the client comes along and says, "Here, master my record," and then I send it back and go, "Okay, which one do you like?" That kind of puts them in a weird spot when they're just expecting me to do it and make it sound good. If it was, I don't remember a time when there wasn't a clear-cut version that I thought, well, this one's at least a little bit better. It's 10% better or whatever, so I'll go this route. And it's not even a matter of color versus non-color. It really comes down to, like, what kind of tools do I want to use? And it's really probably the most common approach that I have is hybrid, where I do part of the processing that way, and then I'll throw part of it in and use some sort of a digital tool, like maybe a single band of a multi-band compressor in the upper mid-range because it's a little bit bright or something, and that just helps tame it, something that's very difficult to do cleanly in the analog domain. Yeah. But I mean, the only time I'll ever send multiple versions is when the client comes along and says, "Hey, we want this rock record cut, and we want it loud." Usually what I'll do is the very first track that I do for them is I'll cut it pretty loud, and then I'll cut one that's a little bit quieter, or maybe a dB or 2 quieter. And I'll send them both to them and say, "Hey, this is a loud version. This is a little more dynamic version. Which one do you like?" And, if right out of the gate, if they're saying they want a loud, they almost always pick the loud version. But I've been surprised a few times. There's been bands that come back and go, we actually really like the more dynamic version better. It feels less flat. It feels less this. It feels better. So I'll do that to start. But like I said, I really am uncomfortable with making the client have to make some decisions and commit to things that they may not even really be equipped to do. In their listening environment, they may not hear the difference, and they may just get confused or something. So it's just, I think we need to commit to certain things in the mastering room and just say, okay, this is my approach to this record, and then try to make it sound as good as we can.
Absolutely. Do you get stems in often?
I have requests for them periodically. I generally work very hard to avoid working on stems.
Right.
There's a principle behind it, but it's also the way that it seems to change. And this might be unique to me, but I listen differently when I know I'm working on stems. There's just no way around it. I always am listening, like, is this too much? Is that too much? Is that? And I start kind of shifting into this sort of mix mindset, which is not my forte.
Absolutely.
Obviously. Yep. And I think it's just better off if I think I work better when my hands are constrained, frankly. And I know what my limitations are because I know how to solve almost every problem within the stereo, file set that's given to me. You start giving me all these different options, and that changes so many things. Beyond that, the problem with stems is that, the reality is for most modern music production, there's going to be some sort of bus processing. And I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I don't know that I've ever seen somebody deliver stems that had like a great 2-bus on it, compressor on it, that was able to print it in such a way so that you put it all together and it sounds like it did when it had the 2-bus. Right. I don't think you can do that. So I think that, to me, I think most of the time when it happens, when people ask me that, it's a mixer that's unsure of themselves, that's, a little like, I don't know, I don't want to screw this up. I think it's close, but my mix room's not great or something like that. And I'd really rather work with them and help them gain confidence and get better at stereo mixing and finishing it than take that, offload that from them, which makes my job more difficult, and I'd say it hinders my ability to do it. At the same time, it doesn't give them the opportunity to improve and get their legs underneath them, you know.
Exactly.
So I think it works better if
we have
just do stereo.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left on this segment, so, and that's probably all this next question warrants. Surround sound? Have you gotten much requests for surround sound lately? And what have you been working on?
A couple projects a year. Surprisingly, most of the surround stuff that I've done has come from South America. I don't know why. It seems to be more popular maybe down there than it is up here. I don't know if that's the case, but I probably do about 2 a year. I love doing surround. It's so fun. It's so immersive, and it's I don't know. I think it's brilliant, but you know, unfortunately, it never took off as a consumer format. Really, I mean, we all know somebody that's got a full surround system, but you know, to really take advantage of it, it has to be done so well. So I just don't. It's not a huge part of our business, no.
Is it mostly live stuff or is it studio stuff?
It's almost entirely been live concerts. Yeah, that's been recorded that way.
Cool. Is it still for DVD or is it just being released? Sorry, go ahead.
We've done DVD stuff. Live concert DVDs, as well as we've done a couple that were just like, you know, I don't know what they authored them. I think they were DVDAs. Because we don't do the authoring in house. We just provide the audio and let them do all that, because I don't have any interest in being an authoring house, frankly.
Well, great. Okay, well, we're coming up on our next break in about 20 seconds. So let me just take this time to thank our sponsors one more time. And when we come back from this break, we will dive into gear and specific pieces of gear and such and that kind of thing. So thank you again to Front End Audio, which is our ultimate pro audio dealer, and Source Connect by Source Element, who helps me connect into the station in San Diego and stay in HD audio. So anyway, you're listening to Sound Experience. We thank you for being here, and we will be back after this message in 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Tim Dolbeare, host of Sound Experience here on Intertalk Radio. And Source Connect by Source Element is the essential tool that we use to link between my studio in Austin, Texas, and the WS radio station in San Diego. Now, with Source Connect, not only can we communicate in real time and with HD audio, but it's synced up and is of a high enough quality that I can use it for real-time ADR work, remote recording, and overdubbing, and it even allows me to remotely control a DAW. Source Connect by Source Element, affordable, high-quality audio and video connection over the internet for all of your production needs.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Girls are talking rock again.
And people are listening.
Today we're talking bands.
Let's talk promotion. Red Giant promo, graphics, EPKs, video, photos, social media, and brand building using content marketing.
But let's talk studio at CCMA, which is events, rehearsal, tour prep, piano, guitar, voice, rock band, lessons, workshops, and clinics. Yeah!
Both proud sponsors of Girls Talk Rock.
Well, get the lowdown on these services and contact me, Tracy, at girlstalkrock.com.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
This is Sound Experience, the show that explores the vast world of audio production through the experiences of our guest and the ears of your host, mixing engineer and producer Tim Dolbeare.
Hey, welcome back to the third segment of Sound Experience powered by Intertalk Radio. We actually, during the break, we're talking about a really cool subject that we're going to continue with because I think it's really important. I had mentioned how mixes that I do, I've actually had in the past people open up a session, and I work in Sequoia, so it's not easy for people to necessarily, not everyone has that. Most people are in Pro Tools, of course. But they'll get a copy of Samplitude or Sequoia, and they'll open up the session, and they'll want to make a tweak and run off the mix with a little tweak to my mix that I was paid to do. So I guess they have the right to do it, but ethically, that would be the word for it. Ethically, it's kind of a gray area because my name goes out there on the mix, and my name goes out there on the product, and if they're changing it, obviously without my okay on it, then it's a false representation of me. I don't have to worry about it necessarily anymore because I mix through an analog bus. So unless they want to get a Great River EQ and a mastering edition Manley Verimu and then print through my tape machine, which no one else has my exact tape machine, it will never even come close to sounding like my mix. But it brings up that ethical point. And Brad, as you were saying, you've had people ask for your mastering notes at the end of it. And of course, they don't have your gear chain either. And so it really brings up an interesting point of we are a work for hire. And so the client does really have the right to change it if we're work for hire. But they shouldn't, and it would be better if they came back to us and asked us to make the changes on a revision than trying to do it themselves. But any issues you've run into in the past when you've handed over those notes to people?
No, not that I'm aware of, simply because really a majority of my chain is not off-the-shelf stuff. It's stuff that we've had custom built. And so, when I had 0.5 dB on this particular EQ that I had custom built, they have no idea how that translates into their digital EQ or their whatever they're using, even their analog EQ, how they're going to sound. They're not going to sound the same when they do that. I don't honestly recall having ever dealt with that. I've always thought that you guys, as mixers especially, had a much steeper hill to climb with that because it's very easy for someone to grab your mix, especially if you mix in Pro Tools and they have all the same plugins and they open it up and it may sound exactly like your mix, and then they start messing with it and it still says mixed by you on it, but suddenly the vocal sounds terrible or something, and people think that that's what you did. In fact, kind of to backtrack about vinyl and how much vinyl we cut now, that's one of the reasons why I have found one vinyl cutting engineer that I try to steer everybody to, because his name is Jeff Powell. He's out of this place here in Memphis called Takeout Vinyl. Has his own killer Neumann lathe. But he views his job as a vinyl cutting engineer differently than like a mastering engineer would. He doesn't just EQ stuff because he wants to or whatever. He literally uses his tools to get the best possible transcription of the master that like I provide onto vinyl. And what really got me hooked up with, like, I've got to have people use this guy, was all these records I've heard over the years that we cut the vinyl on, that we cut the master on, the vinyl cutting master, send it to a cutting engineer. They make some radical change to it because that's what they do, or that's their chain is that colored or something. And then I get the piece of vinyl to listen to it after it's released, and it doesn't sound like my work at all. It's radically different. And on the back, it doesn't say, EQ'd by Brad Blackwood, vinyl cut by, or mastered by, which is what it really should say, whoever cut the vinyl. It says mastered by Brad Blackwood, boom. And so the whole world thinks, hey, this is what Brad's work sounds like. And so I've worked really hard over the years to steer people. You need to use this guy, or if you're not going to use him, there's 2 or 3 other guys that I want you to use. Obviously, it's the client's choice. I mean, I can't make them do one thing or the other. But I usually try to relay that to them that, hey, this is a very important step and it can radically alter the sound of your record. So please heed my advice, because we'll both be happier, if we make the right choice here. Right.
Not to mention they're paying you a lot of money for your expertise, and then to have someone else tweak it down the road and have it incorrect is a waste. It's just not good business. Yeah, no. So, okay, before we get too much far down rabbit hole, let's jump into equipment before we run out of time, because there's so much cool gear that you guys have there that I wanted to ask you about. What's your website address so everyone knows it?
It's euphonicmasters.com, EUPHONICMASTERS.com.
Perfect. And we will have a link to that also on the EnterTalk Radio website, which most likely you're at if you're listening to this. So you should be able to link through from there. Look at the gear selection. There's many pieces of gear in there that are custom made, and I would love to get a verbal tour of the gear that you have that is custom.
All right. So you want to call out pieces and go from there, or how do you want to do that?
Sure. Oh, I'd love to do that. Let's talk about your mastering console that you have that you guys built.
Okay. That's one of the oldest custom pieces that we had. When we were early on building the studios and really looking for something, I was looking for basically an analog transfer console. I wanted something that I could transfer the audio through, that I could hardwire, individual pieces in and out of the chain, that sort of a thing, also with some monitoring functions built into it. And as I started looking at the things on the market, there really wasn't an off-the-shelf solution at the time that did that. Now there are a few different companies that make these sort of, routing boxes that you can buy. But I also wanted to do something. I figured if I built the chain carefully enough and it was quiet enough and it had the right drive capabilities and things like that, I could build a passive console and avoid one more stage of coloration. And so that console is entirely passive. There's not anything active in it whatsoever. It's all Mil-Spec Shopko switches with Teflon coated wire. It's in to out. There's literally nothing there but the wire and the switches. So it's literally as neutral as you can get with regards to the sound and the impact on the sound. There are some caveats that go along with using a passive console. That means that your output, the cables from that to the amp have to be as short as you can really make them. And so, we don't have like this fancy trough that goes 15, 20 feet over to the amps. It goes directly straight out of the back of the console on the floor, straight to my amplifiers. But, as long as you're relatively deep, close like that, and you've got a good chain, you won't have any high frequency roll off, or anything like that. And it just sounds amazing. It's completely open and effortless. And, there's some great sounding active consoles out there, but, they can't sound better than this. They can only approach, as good as this since it's passive. So, that's really the approach to that. That was to build a passive console that would allow, individual switching of pieces of gear. I built it with 6 inserts and thought, well, I'll never have more than 6 pieces of gear. That's plenty, And of course, now I have 70 EQs alone. So it's
So do you patch those in, or do you have a secondary switching system to switch chains in?
Well, no, what I've started doing is basically I have everything lined up. Of course, they're stacked. The pieces of gear are stacked. And all the early pieces of gear I had built, I didn't have bypass switches built into them because I thought, well, they're just wired into the console. All the later pieces, I included bypass switches on the gear itself, so I could just take it out of the chain on the front panel of the piece of gear if I decided I didn't want to use that particular piece. So through that, we're able to make it together. It's a bit of a kludge compared to what it could have been if I'd had a little more foresight, but here we are.
Exactly. You have 4 EQs listed. One is a BPEQ, which I'm guessing is parametric.
Yes, we have 2 of those.
Is that correct? Okay. And then you have a VSS.
That's the Barry Porter. Oh, sorry. That's the Barry Porter net EQ. This was actually the first one that I'm aware of that was ever actually built from his net EQ that he released before he died. And Frank Lacey out of Mississippi is my tech that builds all this stuff for me. And he came up with this brilliant board layout. And so I've got 2 of those now. Sitting stacked on each other. Yeah, the BPEQ. It's great, transparent, really clean EQ.
You have a VSS shelving EQ. Can you tell us about that one?
That was interesting. It's a variable slope shelving EQ. It does your typical 6 and 12 dB per octave, but Frank figured out a way to make a 3 dB per octave analog slope, which I'm not a super tech savvy guy, but everybody that I've told that to, they kind of look at me funny when I say that. They start squinting their eyes trying to figure out how on earth you can do that. And apparently it's very, very complicated. The 6 and 12 dB slope portions of the board that are in there measure probably 3 inches by 6 inches. The 3 dB per octave portion takes up the entire rest of the interior of the chassis. It's ginormous what it takes to actually be able to do 3 dB per octave in the analog domain. But that's a brilliant sounding EQ. You can set something like 8 or 10K at 3 dB per octave, and you add a half dB, and it just reaches so far down, and the transition is so natural and smooth because it's so light. There's not like a hard knee to it that it's almost like a tilt EQ without having to have the bottom tilt. You could add top and bottom with it at the same time. I absolutely love that thing. It's a brilliant sounding EQ.
Fantastic. What about the wedge shelving equalizer?
Okay, that was a lot of these I've had built because I just had some idea and I said, I want you to make this. And they all kind of turned out cool. This pranks of genius. This is a purely passive EQ section with an output stage, a gain stage at the back end of it. So it's just a top and bottom shelf. And it's, then it's got, I think, 8 dB of gain on the output. And so that's it. Nothing fancy about that, but I just really like the way it sounds. Those passive filters sound really cool. And, it's not really colored or anything, but they just have a different tone to me than doing like 6 dB per octave on the VSS, which is a fully active box. So, yeah, So that's just another shelving EQ.
Awesome. What about the Davalizer EQ?
The Davalizer, yeah, that is the old, like, this kind of quasi-famous, I'd say it's famous by now, mastering equalizer from A&M Studios. It's named after Dave Collins. He's the primary designer on it. Worked with, I think, Jonathan Little was one of the techs that worked on it with him quite a bit. And that's just a really, really simple. It's all in the implementation. The circuit itself is apparently really simple. It's just the way you implement it, the way you build the switches with the caps and everything on it, just all the stuff that goes into it is very, very, it's kind of a pain to make them apparently because of how you have to do it. But it's a peaking EQ. It's a fixed, I think it's about 0.4, real broad band. But it just sounds fantastic. Sounds really, really, really good sounding EQ. It's very neutral. Again, pretty much everything I've got is that way, except for maybe the 2087. But really like the Davalizer. It's another super clean, super nice EQ. It's just apparently a real pain to build correctly.
Okay, so there's one more thing I see on your website that has your name on it. That would be the Custom Sample Rate Converter, or SRC.
Yes, that's a hardware sample rate converter that we had built a number of years ago. I don't remember the chipset that was in it. That was back when we used to load in, and I would do limiting on load in. Back in the day, before there were really great sounding software digital limiters, I would load in and capture everything fully limited, as loud as it was going to be, whatever for release. And then it would go through the sample rate converter last, so to get it back down to 44.1 if we're working at a higher sample rate. And that way, whatever was loaded into Sequoia, I'd top it and tail it, and it's ready to go. Now that the digital limiters and such have gotten so much better over the years, I actually just monitor through them on input and capture at whatever sample rate I want, and I can manipulate it from there inside the box. So I don't really use the hardware sample rate converter as often anymore because of that. Because it's much easier to capture it more dynamic. And the added benefit of that is that when I get done with a project and I've got it loaded in, it's a fully dynamic project. I mean, it's not squared off, limited, crushed, or whatever. It's nice and clean and open. And so that way, whenever somebody says, hey, I want you to give me a vinyl cutting master, I can just turn the limiter off and print this really dynamic, wide open sounding vinyl cutting master. That sounds so much better for cutting vinyl than something that's been heavily limited. And so that's really the added beauty of that as well.
So what are some of your favorite digital tools, some of your favorite plugins right now?
I'm really a big fan of, hold on, give me a second here. Let me open this up so I can start looking through some of my, it really depends on what we're talking about. I like the DMG Equilibrium EQ quite a bit. I think you're the one who actually may have turned me on to that initially. I just really like it.
All the way around.
I know there's a bunch of...
yeah, you actually turned me on to that. Yeah.
Oh, well,
all the way around.
I
got it from
still
you.
Do. So I also really like FabFilter, the Pro MB, which is a multi-band compressor. And I don't do a lot of multi-band, like from the standpoint of using multiple bands. It's usually one band at a time. And really, even then, it's probably only at about, 25, 30% of projects. But it gets a good bit of use because I'm able to do things and control things in specific areas that's so much better, I think, sounding than full broadband compression, where if you don't get the frequency balance just right before you start compressing, different things are triggering the compression in a really different way. With these digital multiband, I can get in there and just really pick certain things out and help kind of squeeze them, keep them jumping out too much, or emphasize them if need be, whatever. Those are probably the two most commonly used tools. I do, probably 90% of my heavy lifting on the digital front with those two pieces alone, or those two plugins alone.
That's cool. What do you use as far as brick wall limiting or some of your choices? Because I'm sure there's a flavor of those two for you.
Yeah, that varies. It's everything from there's obviously Isotope makes the maximizer that's built into Ozone 7s and Ozone 6 are both pretty good. I've used the Fab Filter Pro L a little bit. Not as hot on that. A lot of people seem to like that. I'm not as crazy about that as they are, as other people are. Depending on the project, sometimes the Oxford Inflator is a really nice touch because it thickens it up. It feels like without making it without getting crunchy. And I even like using G-Clip, which is like this. I think it's free. I don't know if I paid for that or not. It's like this. It's a clipping plug-in, but you can dial in the knee on it, so it's not necessarily this hard clipping, and it's a nice way to sort of, you can get some level without having to really get it crackly and crunchy. Also without having to stuff grabbing the transients as much. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, what was the name of that one again?
It's called G-Clip, just like one word, G-C-L-I-P.
Okay, G-Clip. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And we'll end with G-Clip because we're down to 30 seconds. So thank you so much for being on my show today. I know it goes fast, huh?
It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, it does. It flies by.
That's cool. All right. Well, all of the information for getting in touch with Brad is on my website or on the site that you're probably on right now, the Intertalk Radio website, the Sound Experience page. And I want to thank you for spending this time with us. And next week we'll be back on with more people and talking about more gear. So any questions, comments, or concerns, always email me at tim@timdolbeare.com. And I look forward to spending this time with you guys again. So this has been Sound Experience. I'm Tim Dolbeare, signing off from Eclectica Studios in Austin, Texas. Now, go make some music. Hi, this is Tim Dolbeare from Eclectica Studios. I'm a full-time mixing and recording engineer. I work with Grammy winners, labels, and indie artists, using state-of-the-art digital mixing and restoration tools and the very best in analog gear. Really, though, it's my ability to bring tracks to life and fulfill your vision for your music. This has made me sought after by producers and artists worldwide. So spend your time working on music and not chasing a mix down a rabbit hole. Go to timdolbeare.com and check out our free one-song mix offer.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. You're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
You know what's all around you every waking moment of your life? Marketing. you're choking on it. I'm Scott Robertson, and when it comes to strategic PR, branding, and marketing, I've seen it all. And actually, I'm still seeing it because bad marketing never sleeps. Join me each week on May the Best Brand Win, right here on Intertalk Radio, and learn how to make the marketing for your brand unforgettable.